idolizing ministry. Like, God had to break a lot of things in me to get me to realize that. And that's hard, especially when you feel like you're called to something, and all of a sudden the doors start closing, and you're like, God told me to do this, but why is it not working? Why is it everything just keep falling apart or breaking, or however you want to say it? And then you realize God's not going to let my idols win. I've made this about doing the ministry rather than worshiping Jesus. And it's kind of like a red flag that goes up. So we talked about maybe some things that you could be idolizing in your life. Maybe you wrote a few of them down. I also want you to think about what are some areas that, like, even though you keep trying over and over and over and over again to make something happen or make something work, what does it feel like just keeps not working? I'm not saying this is the truth every time, but it's a good possibility that God is not letting that idol win. And it's time to submit that to God and then move forward. It's a reason why in the 12 steps, like one of the first few steps is like, hey, submit this to God first, and then we can deal with your addiction problem. Instead of saying, like, we're going to go ahead and fix this. Because it doesn't work if you make recovery an idol over God. You have to submit it to God first. You have to submit it to Jesus first. Oh, interesting. Somehow my notes on this disappeared. Maybe I threw them on the ground. I don't have notes on it, but I'm going to share it anyway. So let's dive in for just a second on what worship actually is in the Bible, right? Because we talked about how, in fact, it's not just music; it's everything. And this can come into the conversation about what we're idolizing a lot easier, right? Because when we think about what we worship in our lives that aren't God, how many of us, like, say we worship food? We don't get in a room with food on a table and like sing songs to food. So it's like, oh, I don't worship food because that's not what worship is. But worship is so much bigger than that. So in the Old Testament, worship, the word for worship is shakah. Everybody say shakah.
Shakah.
Shakah. Sounds like that. I wonder, Jake, can you come up here? Yeah. I'm going to use you as an example, and apparently this happens to you all the time.
That's what happens when you live with the pastor.
Yeah. So the word shakah means to lay prostrate before, not prostate.
Okay.
We're okay. Sorry, that was a little dirty. But go ahead and just lay face up on the ground. To lay prostrate before, and then lay down. Face up.
Oh.
Cool. So in the olden days, this is how someone would show allegiance to a king and trust in a king, is they lay down like this, and the king would put their foot on their neck.
No, don't do that.
Yeah. I'm not going to step, right? So you can't see, but you can imagine. If all of a sudden I just decided to step forward, he's dead.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So this is thank you for trusting me, by the way.
Yeah.
I didn't even tell him what I was going to do, but he just fell for it. Okay. But this is what worship looked like. When people thought about worship in the Old Testament, this is what it looked like. It didn't look like singing. They thought about this. They thought about being this guy on the ground, and God could, at any moment, like you're in full submission. At any moment, anything could be taken from you, anything could be given to you, but you're fully trusting, fully submitted. Everybody give Jake a hand. Good job. In the New Testament, the word is proskuneo. Everybody say proskuneo.
Proskuneo.
Hey, nice. Good job. This means to lick a hand like a dog licks his master's hand. Which, if you like dogs, this is really beautiful. If you don't like dogs, it's gross. Right? But think about this. It's a lesser being trying its best to show affection for a greater being. And that's what worship meant in the New Testament. It wasn't necessarily singing songs. It's just like any time where it's like I'm trying to show you affection, and as imperfect and as sloppy as it might be, I'm going to try anyway. That was worship. But now we bring that into the context of the things that we idolize over God. What are the things that we submit ourselves to? What are the things that we just focus all of our attention and adoration on? Whether it's in front of other people or behind closed doors. All of a sudden, the things that we can worship in life, it's expanded quite a bit, right? So, taking that into what the conversation is that we're having here. Now I can throw that page over there. I love the fact that God breaks idols in our lives, even though it can be painful. I remember a conversation that we had at our church like 6 years ago, and it's just this concept of Jesus plus nothing equals everything. And if you try to put something else in that blank spot, Jesus plus X equals everything, it's going to always lead to heartbreak, and it's basically it's an idolatry problem. It's putting the idol of whatever it is next to the presence of God, next to God, saying, I need both of these things and I'll be happy. And Jesus is saying, no, trust me, you just need me. Jesus is saying, trust me, you just need me. We like to put God in neat little packages and neat little places in our lives. And this is what the Philistines did too, right? When the ark started, bad stuff started happening. God's breaking their idols. They're growing tumors. They're getting unhealthy. Like, bad things are happening. Their reaction was to push the presence of God away, to get it out. We got to get it to a comfortable distance from ourselves. So they moved it from city to city, and no matter where they moved the presence of God, he was like, sorry, your idols are not going to win. You are going to regret the fact that you're worshiping something else besides me. And when I think about how we do that in today's culture, I think about Sunday morning service. It's comfortable. It's that 1, 2, 3 hour block of time a week where we can come and we can worship. It's kind of putting God at arm's length a little bit and saying, like, cool, I checked that box. I hung out with God for a little while, but I didn't bring him into the rest of my week. I didn't figure out how to pay attention to him and focus on him and adore him. And again, I'm not perfect at this. I'm so far from perfect at this. But again, it's a challenging message. It's meant to make us think about how can we bring worship into everything that we do, not just a neat little package on Sunday morning, or even broken down even more, the part of the service where we sing. Tiny little package, like right now we're worshiping Jesus, even though we're not singing songs, right? So I just want you guys to real quick just join me in prayer here. Just go ahead and repeat after me, because I think that it's a smart idea with prayer. Every once in a while, pray out loud. So just say, God, I'm sorry for placing other things before you. Jesus, you are the one who is on the throne of my life. Thank you for your grace, which covers my mistakes. I intentionally give you the leadership of my life in every area. Help me to grow in maturity in my faith. This is where the rubber meets the road. It's the main struggle that children of Israel dealt with through the entire Old Testament is idolatry. It was constant, like, they worship God for a little while, and then they're like, oh wait, we can worship this other thing too. Or forget God, we'll just worship this other thing instead. And it just over and over and over and over again. They're always doing this, and God even, like, at some point, like, calls Israel prostitutes, just like jumping from thing to thing. And it's like not a pretty picture. But if you look at the Christian life, like, it's something that we were made to worship. And when we aren't putting all of that purpose into God, we'll worship something else. We'll figure something else out to worship. We're good at worshiping. That's what we were made for. We're worshiping machines. That's our purpose, is to put butter on pancakes, right? Like, we are worshiping machines, and we'll figure out something to worship. So we need to focus on God with that worship. So I want to give you guys a couple of practical things too, not just leave you with like sad thoughts of like, oh shoot, I've got idols in my life. I didn't even think about this. I want to give you some practical ways to start dealing with those and put God back at the center. The first one, I believe this so wholeheartedly. The first step to breaking idols in our lives is tithing. Money represents anything that we can exchange money for, right? By itself, money doesn't really mean anything. It's always about what you trade it for, right? So if I could trade money for food, and I worship food, if I give God some of that money and say, you get the money, that means that God gets the food.
Yeah.
Right? Back in the Old Testament, they sacrificed bulls and rams and a lot of food items because food is literally what kept them alive. And so putting that in there is like the equivalent of us putting money in the offering. But tithing is such a great way to trust God, and it starts to break down those idols real quick, because if you're idolizing entertainment and now you give God some of that money and you say like, hey, I'm choosing you first, you don't have as much money for the entertainment. And this is why Jesus said, where your money is, there your heart will also be. So I want to challenge you guys this week. If you have a budget that you track, which I highly recommend you do, look at your budget. The things, your budget will literally outline for you your idol list. It's scary, it's challenging, but I'm challenging you to do it, okay? And then make an adjustment. Figure out how to put God first. Like for Lisa and I, it doesn't mean that we tithe more than we pay for our mortgage, because I don't think we do. No, we don't. She's like, math, no. Not yet. But we intentionally choose to put the tithe in first. It doesn't have to be an amount thing, but we don't pay any bills until we tithe first. We want God to get that first. Another thing that you can do after you've started tithing and giving offerings, to just acknowledge that God is first and on the throne of your life. I encourage you to make a list, kind of like we made a list of like 3 things, but you might be like, man, I've got like 20 things that come before God in my list of stuff. That's, unfortunately, it's just really normal. It's the culture that we live in. It's American culture. Like, we're just going to have to deal with some of the challenges that come with it. Make that list and then just intentionally pray through them, placing them all in God's hands. And what I mean by that is placing in God's hands and saying, God, if you want, you can crush it. Or you can let it flourish. Either way, I'm putting it in your hands, fully do whatever you want. Like, this is really hard to do with kids. It's really hard to do with your job. It's really hard to do with your spouse. But ultimately, if you want to worship God first, you have to lay those things down, prostrate before him, and say, like, I trust you enough to let your foot be over its neck. That's scary, but that's what worship looks like. And then, after you've done those things, share some of those idolatry issues with a trusted spiritual running partner. Just say, like, hey, this is a thing in my life. Like, can you help hold me accountable to make sure that I'm worshiping God first? Just so that way it's out in the open, and you can actually move forward with it, and you got somebody else alongside you. You're not just trying to solo Rambo through your Christian life, right? You actually got somebody to fight alongside. So, got some practical stuff that you can do with that. Hopefully that's super helpful. I know that those things have helped me big time in life. And I want to just leave you with this, because this is a conversation about worship and what worship actually is and what worship actually looks like. This is Romans. It's probably my favorite verse on worship. Romans 12 says, therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. That's from the NIV, but I really, really like the Message translation of this, because it makes it more modernized for us. So here's what I want you to do, God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what he wants from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you and develops well-formed maturity in you. I just absolutely love the way that breaks that down for us. And especially in the beginning, it just says, here's what I want you to do, God helping you. The beautiful thing about the grace of God is that his Spirit is in us as followers of Christ. We're not trying to break down idols on our own. Like, I love that God did the work of knocking over that Dagon idol, right? And we can allow God to do that stuff, and we can say, hey, this is what we're going to do, God helping us. Because he doesn't expect us to just do it all on our own. That's why he gave us the helper, right? So I just want to pray for you real quick, and we'll wrap up. Hopefully this has been a good kind of eye-opener about worship in general.
Yeah.
But Jesus, thank you so much for everything you did for us. Dying on the cross for us, raising to life for us, showing us that you have ultimate power to break anything that's holding us back from you. God, we lay our idols down at your feet this morning, and we ask you to help us keep our eyes focused on you. Help us to submit to you. Help us to lay our worries and our fears and the things that we're excited about, the things that we love, all of those things at your feet, because ultimately you are the reason why we are here. You created us, and you made us, and then you died for us, and you rose again, drawing us back to yourself. You're the reason that we're here this morning, learning about this, talking about this, having this conversation about worship, like the deepest purpose that we have. And God, we thank you for what you're about to do in us. We thank you for what you're doing in New Life Church. We thank you for what you're doing in us and through us throughout the course of the entire week and the weeks to come. In your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. Amen.
That's a good word.
Thanks. That was fun.
Worship is so important. Everything we do is worship. And everything we do, we're worshiping something.
Yep.
Right? And so we have to take a minute and think, are we worshiping God with what we're doing? Or are we worshiping something else? I was also reminded as you were talking, John Piper once said that missions exist because worship doesn't. Ooh. And that's like a really good statement. You're like, wait, oh.
Can you say that again?
Missions exists because worship doesn't. People are created by God to worship him. Mm-hmm. And the reason why we go out, we do evangelism, we do missions work to people who don't know God, is so that they can know him and worship him. Mm-hmm. And I know this is a year where God has us going deeper and higher. Just like a tree sticking down its deep roots and reaching out its branches. So, just thank you so much, Pastor Ted. Mm-hmm. And I just want to, it's a challenging word for all of us, and to remind you guys to dig deep and to really make sure that we're giving God the worship he does. Because it's not about going to a place to worship. It's not about how we sing a song or things like that. But Jesus says that we will worship in spirit and in truth. Amen. So, go out. We still got coffee left. I think there might still be some pie. Continue to fellowship, hang around, all that good stuff. And We will see you Wednesday night or next Sunday. God is good. Amen?
Amen.